just dig into that difference between focusing on what's right versus focusing on what's wrong when it comes to your trajectory in life.
Well, I think it's important to realize wherever focus goes, energy flows. It's corny, but it's true, right? In fact, maybe an easier way of saying it is, we don't experience life. None of us do. We experience the life we focus on. So in any moment, what's wrong is always available. So is what's right. So it's not about being positive. It's about being intelligent, right? When you're in a totally negative state and the world's going to end, and there are people like believing that in the next 12 years, the entire environment's going to collapse and they won't have a child. You got to look at the impact of what you're believing, and you got to look at and say, where's my focus going? I can always be upset about something. I can always find something to be joyous or at least grateful for, which leads to joy. And I think it's having that, learning to discipline your disappointments, not allow them to grow and to move on and to use whatever life is giving you. But to me, it's like, I think there's 3 decisions that people make every moment of their life. Now, I'm not saying they make them consciously. If you make them unconsciously, you have the same patterns over and over again, and usually they're not good ones, right? Sometimes they're good, but not usually. And I learned these really because I had an experience when I was 11 years old. I was my 4th father, and he got fired, and we had no money and no food. We were always poor, but we wouldn't have starved. We had saltine crackers and peanut butter, right? But when everybody else around you was having a big Thanksgiving dinner, it was pretty depressing. And my mom and dad were saying things to each other that once you say them, you can't take them back. And I have a younger brother, 5 years younger, and a younger sister, 7 years younger. So I felt like the parent almost. I'm trying to protect them. I'm only 11 years old. And what changed my life is this bang on the door. I go to open the door, and there's this guy, big guy with groceries in both hands. And he had a pot on the ground with an uncooked turkey. And he looks at me and says, "Is your father here?" And I'm like, just one moment. I'm just like, this to me was like Christmas, right? This is the greatest thing. It's going to stop the fighting. It's going to be incredible. So I go to my father and I say, Dad, there's somebody at the door for you. And he's yelling at my mom through the closed door that she slammed on him. And he goes, "You answer." I said, "I did. It's for you." He goes, "Who is it?" I said, "I don't know." They said, "They got to talk to you," right? And I had this level of excitement, like little boy excitement, like this is going to be the greatest thing. And my dad opens the door, and I'll never forget the look on his face. He got angry, which shocked me. And he said to the man, "We don't accept charity," before the guy even said anything. And he went to slam the door, and the guy had leaned in slightly, so it hit his shoulder, and it bounced off of him, which made my dad even madder. And then he said, he goes, sir, I'm just the delivery guy. Somebody knows you're having a tough time. Everyone has a tough time, and they just want you to have a great Thanksgiving with your family." My father says, "We don't accept charity." He goes to slam it again. But I think because he leaned in, his foot came in. Now it hit his foot and bounced open again. It's just like, now I got fear runs in my body because I know my father, right? And my father looks at him, and the guy looks at him and says something. I thought my father was going to punch him in the face. He didn't do it mean. He had a softness in his face, and he said, "Sir," he saw me, and he said, "Don't make your family suffer because of your ego." And the veins on my father's side of his neck were like this. He's beet red. I thought for sure he was going to punch the guy, and then all of a sudden his shoulders dropped, like defeated. He took the groceries, he slammed them on the ground, slammed the door, didn't even pick up the turkey, and didn't say thank you or anything. And shortly after that, he left our family, which to me at the time was the worst experience of my life, I thought. And so I was kind of obsessed with trying to figure out why. And I didn't figure it out for a couple of years. I had versions of it in my head, but now I use it in my life every day. And so I submit it to your viewers as well. These are the 3 decisions that I think everyone makes every moment. First, you're doing it right now. What are you going to focus on? You're going to be focusing on my story I'm telling you. You're going to be focusing on the next question you're going to ask. You're going to be focusing on how your stomach feels if you've not eaten. There's a million things you could focus on, literally. But we don't experience life. We experience the part of life we focus on. And so the bottom line is, I know my father and I had a different experience because we had different focuses that day. I was focused on his food. What a concept. This is cool. He was focused on that he had not taken care of his family. And I know that because, he said it about 20 times under his breath, and my mother echoed it, of course. The second decision, though, the minute you focus on something, your brain has to decide, what does it mean? And meaning is what creates emotion, and emotion is where your life is, right? And so the quality of your life is the quality of your emotions. If you got $1 billion, and every day you're pissed off and angry, your life's quality is called pissed off and angry. If you got 3 beautiful children, a husband or wife you love, but you worry all the time, your life is worry, So his focus and then his meaning, that was the worst part. The meaning he gave it was that he was worthless and didn't belong here. And that usually leads to the third decision, which is, what are you going to do? And look, if the meaning is something happens, you say this person is dissing me, disrespecting me, or is this person challenging me, or is this person coaching me, or is this person loving me? If you think they're dissing you, you're going to have a very different emotional reaction than if you think they're coaching you or loving you. And then, of course, that's going to change what decision you make. Because if you're angry, you're going to make a different decision than if you're playful or generous or whatever the case may be. So those 3 decisions control our lives. But so your viewers or listeners, I give them an opportunity to take a look at it, because there's some patterns that you can make some simple patterns and change your whole life of focus. So the first one is, and I'd ask you 2 questions for you. One, Chris, is what do you think most people's answer to this question is? And the other is, what's yours? If you're ready to play. All right. It's real simple. We all have a pattern of focusing on what we have and at times on what's missing. Which one do you think most people spend more time focusing on, what they have or what's missing?
What's missing?
What do you focus more on?
What's missing?
Yes. It isn't something that comes, the focus on what's missing is not something that comes with someone who is a failure. It comes very much with people who are very successful. And the question then becomes, if you're always focused on missing, how can you sustain happiness?
You're in a permanent place of lack.
That's correct. So scarcity is there. So you'll have drive, right, to keep staying on the hamster wheel of achievement, but you're not going to see much fulfillment, not in a sustainable way. It's impossible. It has nothing to do with you or me, right? It's just software. And we got a soul. We're not software, but you run your software so often, you start thinking your mind is you versus my mind is a tool that I'm going to use. Or if I don't use it, it's going to use me. So the majority of people do that. And by the way, during COVID, that number exploded because so many things were taken from people. They were constantly focused on what's missing, and that produces nothing but pain. Second question. And I think I know your answer to this one. Which do you tend to focus on more? What do you think most people focus on more? What they can control or what they can't control? And then which one do you focus more on?
I think most people would probably focus on what they can't control. I'm an even balance, I would say, between the two. I'm
That's
working
good.
quite hard to try.
I was going to say, you strive. It's part of your philosophy, right? To focus on what you can control, right? So that's part of the Stoicism, whole philosophy of Stoicism, right? So, but most people, you're absolutely right. Now, in my seminars, it's different because I got 15, 20,000 people. I ask that question, and the vast majority of them say they're focused on what's missing, but the vast majority of them say they do focus on what they can control. That's why they came. Why would they spend their money and time? They want to take control of their business or their body or their relationship, whatever the case may be. So they have a different belief structure. If you have both of those out of whack, you got some real challenges. Most people have at least one out of whack, which creates stress. And then the third one, and there's many more than these, but just quickie for the people at home, and I'm asking them to do this for themselves if they want to. Where do you tend to focus more? Your past, your present, or your future? We all spend all 3, but where do you spend more of your time? Where do you think most people do? Where do you?
I guess most people just not the present, perhaps dreams for the future. For me, I would say mostly in the future as well.
Yeah, and that's where most achievers live. Me too. I have to discipline myself not to do that, because what makes you an achiever is anticipation. You've learned by a long time, anticipation is power. As I'm listening, I'm watching you, you're anticipating, you're processing, right?
Dopamine's a hell of a drug, yeah.
Yes, it does. And it gives you a sense of control. And there, also, if you don't anticipate, it's like playing a video game against the child. Now, you're a different generation, so you might kick the child's ass. I don't know. But my generation, I didn't play any video games. So if a child, is your nephew or your niece or your grandson, granddaughter, or your son or daughter, and you give them a gift, let's say, of playing a video game, you give them a new video game for Christmas or their birthday, what's the first thing to do? Oh, come play with me, Pops. Come play with me, Uncle. Come play. No, I don't do those things. Oh, let me show you. It's so easy. Boom, 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 boom. 3 shots. Boom, boom. They're going great. So some part of you finally says, I'll show this little bastard something here. I'll go ahead and do this thing here. All right, fine. Give me this thing. But you should know you're being set up when the kid says something to you like, you go first. Right? And so you go and you go, boom, 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 and you're dead in 4 seconds, right? The kid goes, not bad for the first time, right? And then they take the gun, ba-doom, 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 and 45 minutes later, you get your second turn, right? Now you're really pissed. Maybe you make it 2 minutes, the kid goes for another 45. Why does the kid win every time? Is it because they're smarter, faster, younger? No, it's because they played this game before. They can anticipate the first bad guy's here, the second bad guy's here. You're in reaction, they're anticipating. So it has tremendous power. So it's addictive when you learn to anticipate. And it's also a great skill set for business, for life, and so forth. I always tell people, if you're running a business, you're always running two businesses, the business you're in and the business you're becoming. If you only focus on the business you're in, someone's going to replace you. If you only focus on what you're going to become, you're going to have the cash flow to be able to get to that place, right? So it's a very similar situation inside of where we are. So for each of us, most of us who are achievers tend to focus on the future, but all the joy is in the present, right? You can have some anticipation in the future and be excited about it. Most people's stress comes from either the past or the future. The majority of people spend a lot of time in the past, right? And the problem is you can't change it. And you can use it as a reference to me, and maybe for you, I don't know, I might project. You've probably come a long way in your life, is my guess. From Love Island to modern wisdom. That's quite a journey. I'll have to have you tell me about that at some point.
I can't believe that you did that bit of research. That was the thing that you dredged up. But yes, the typical trajectory from Love Island to this podcast.
Typical. So there's been some growth in your psychology, and your spirit, your soul, to say the least, right? So the contrast of remembering where you were and who you've become is probably a beautiful thing. But if you use it that way, but most people go back and they ruminate about the past, or they ruminate about a future that they can't control, and the present's there. So the goal is, ideal is fuel. The ideal fuel is a combination of the two. Present, that gives you that centered grounding, and anticipation for the future, the ability to bounce back and forth, is the ideal for people. So I'll give you an example to wrap this up. Do you know anybody who has, I ask this when I have an audience, giant audience, how many of you, I'll say, know somebody who takes antidepressants and they're still depressed?
Yes.
90% of the room will raise their hand. How's that possible? Because first of all, 2 years ago, they did meta studies on the cover of Newsweek, and it said SSRIs do not work. Sugar pills work as well as SSRIs. Dancing to music was more effective by some huge margin. Yeah, you read the study.
Yeah.
We're still giving them to everybody. Doesn't make any sense.
Should be salsa classes.
It's just, but it's just, you think of the insanity of that, of us continue to do what doesn't make any sense. So I think, your question is really focus, bringing it back to the focus. I think if we make the right decisions, the first one is what we're going to focus on, and that's just a habit. You change anything. Take that person. Why is that person depressed still? Because all that drug does is numb you. And numbing doesn't deal with the issue. What's the real issue? You're constantly focused on what's missing versus what you have. You're focused on what you can't control. And there's two worlds, right? The external world, the internal world. We can't control the external world. We can influence it. We can't control it. If you think you're in control, you have a deep illusion. I went to Mexico recently. You and I were talking off the air, and I discovered I couldn't even fully control my bowels. It's not something I want to talk about, but it's like all the willpower in the world doesn't mean squat. No pun intended, right? So it's the part we can control is what's going on inside of us. And that we can control what we focus on. We can control the meaning. We can decide the meaning. We're the meaning makers, and we can decide what to do. And when we make those three decisions, we're in control of our life, and all the anxiety and bullshit tends to go away, especially if we're trying to do that to serve something more than ourselves. Not like you're so unselfish you're not going to succeed, because you can't serve something more than yourself and not benefit, right? So it's not like you're sacrificing, the people that play that game. It's not a sacrifice. It's like philanthropy. I hear people talk about, philanthropy. Well, a friend of mine the other day was on an airplane, and somebody was reading, I just had my book, it triggered me, it was Life Force. And the person was really into it, and he said, hey, he's known me for 45 years. And he says, what do you think of that book? Oh, it's incredible, the stem cells and this, you can't believe the breakthroughs, and I don't know why we didn't know about this, and blah, blah, blah. What do you think of the author? Oh, he seems like a really good guy, and he donated all the profits to feed people. And of course, he's totally rich. So, I mean, it's easy when you're rich, right? And my buddy turns to him and he said, well, what if I told you that I knew him since he was 17 years old, 45 years ago? And that I remember when he had $20 to his name, there was a guy in the street and he gave him $10 and told me that the time to give is when you don't have it. And he said, and I watched him build that all the way up there. He taught me that if you don't give a dime out of $1, you're not going to give 100 million out of $1 billion, right? And It's like people look at things and they make their focus something like, oh, I'm sacrificing, or I'm going to do philanthropy because, I'm rich. No, you do philanthropy because it's a source of kindness and love. Philanthropy can be your attention. Philanthropy can be your time. Philanthropy can be a buck, $5. Philanthropy can be you're in line with people in Starbucks and I remember doing this research, I couldn't believe it. If you buy 5 people who you don't know their coffee, you get a biochemical change that has a more lasting impact than most things you could purchase for yourself, including large purchases. So it's intelligent selfishness is the truth. You can't possibly do good and not feel good. When you want some self-esteem, do something worthwhile beyond just yourself.